Hey everyone! I'm Albert Boris. You know, if there's one game I'm a little shocked by how much it's managed to completely evade the discourse online, it would have to be the first Super Mario Galaxy. I've pretty much never seen any form of controversy surrounding this game at all. The closest was when they released a bundle with the second game last year, but that was because it was a $70 port of decade-old games, not because of any inherent issues with the game itself. And to be fair, I'm not entirely surprised that this is the case. It's certainly not a bad game. Not only is the idea of Mario venturing through space more dramatic and power fantastical than anything he's done before, and not only is its atmosphere a lot darker and more deep as well, but I suppose the time frame it released in largely had an effect as well. The internet was a lot more niche back when it came out in the late 2000s, with much smaller focus on negativity farming, and now that we've gone almost 2 decades since the game came out, wait, has it really been that long? We've come to a point where the roughly 12 million people who grew up with it are becoming nostalgic adults, contributing even further to its positive reception. Heck, I can attest myself personally to having a soft spot for this game as well, as it was one of the first Mario adventures I played growing up. Is it one of the greatest and most timeless Nintendo games of all time though? Yeah, that's where I'm a little shocked its reputation is as steady as it is. Like, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely a really good game, and the cultural impact it had can't be understated enough. What is overstated though, at least in my opinion, is the game as it is itself. Like, as a child, sure, Mario in space seemed like the coolest thing ever, but now that that childlike hype is worn off, and I've been able to play more Mario games than just Galaxy, I also can't really help but feel that as the years have gone by, Super Mario Galaxy has also just not really aged that well in its ideas and execution, when compared to the likes of Super Mario 3D World, Odyssey, or heck even Galaxy 2. And since we're also getting a new Mario Galaxy movie in just 2 months from now, I figured why not take this opportunity to look back on the game and discuss all of my unfiltered thoughts on the game, both the good and bad. Quick disclaimer, this is not a rant. I fully appreciate Super Mario Galaxy for what it set out to do and the memories it gave me. At the same time though, I also just don't think it's all that. And that it's also deeply flawed in a way that most, if not all, the other 3D Marios aren't. So with all that being said, I say let's dive in right away.
Life would be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above.
Alright, so opening up, let's start off by discussing perhaps my least disagreeable take on the game. That being that the controls are kind of, well, I wouldn't say they're bad, but they're very limited. For me, the movement in Mario games, and especially 3D Mario ones at that, has always been one of their most important aspects for me that make them so great to play, and I don't think it should be a surprise why. I mean, it's a platformer series. It needs to feel good to jump and run around everything. And for the most part, 3D Mario games have always nailed this. The momentum is usually swift and snappy, with tons of moves you can pull off at your disposal, to the point that it's usually never boring to even just walk around. Even Mario 64 and Sunshine, for as unpolished and sensitive as they could be, generally got this memo as well, even if they had a higher skill floor for getting used to the movement. However, where Super Mario Galaxy's controls stand out though, and by extension Galaxy 2's as well, is how much they don't really stand out. On one hand, there's certainly more than functioning. The movement is responsive, and all of the most essential actions such as wall kicks, long jumps, backflips, triple jumps, and I guess side jumps are there. There's enough to the point that I can play through the game as intended normally, and they're also polished enough to the point that I wouldn't ever blame the game if I ever lost. However, at the same time, the controls are also just really boring. Momentum is just not really a thing in Mario Galaxy at all. For starters, Mario always runs at the same constant speed, no matter what, and there's nothing you can do to spice it up. You can't dive forward for quick bursts of speed, you can't roll forward, heck, you can't even press an individual button to go faster. I mean, I guess you can at least skate when on ice, so at least you won't have to slip everywhere, but otherwise, you're always limited by what you can do. And the insult to the wound, if you do any fancy jump move while running, such as a long jump, you don't keep that momentum afterwards. Is that admittedly a small deal since Mario accelerates quickly anyways? Yeah, it is. That doesn't mean it feels good though, especially when Mario is already floaty and stiff as it is here. Pretty much anything revolving jumping just feels a lot more sluggish than it should be. If you jump while standing still, for example, you can't even gain any sort of distance forward or back. On the whole, the controls of Super Mario Galaxy are just not snappy or versatile at all. There are virtually no moves you can do that aren't deadly essential, like dives, twirl jump, or crouch roll, even though they could have gone a great way to make the movement feel less robotic. And it makes navigating the game and its levels feel a lot more restricting when you can't really do all that much. Especially because the trademark action that's also unique to Mario's moveset in Galaxy is also not really that interesting. Compared to say Mario Sunshine's Flood, which lets you hover in the air, jump up 50 feet, or dash across water, or Mario Odyssey's Cappy, who was not only a versatile boomerang, but could also possess enemies, Mario Galaxy just, lets you spin. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a downplay. It's certainly a fun move, and by far the saving grace of this game's controls, since it not only gives you an additional way to defeat enemies, but it also kind of acts as a light double jump, giving you not only slightly more altitude, but also a way to correct jumps if you screw up. It's cool enough, I just also don't think it's that interesting, and it doesn't really fix any of the momentum-based or other inflexibility issues that plague the controls. The only limitation I'd say is really excusable to this game is that the camera can't move around freely. And that's only because the Wii Remote doesn't have a circular joystick, only a D-pad. And on the one hand, I suppose I can sort of see why they didn't make the base movement too good in Mario Galaxy. Because unlike other 3D Marios that really perfect it, Super Mario Galaxy also has actual power-ups that can transform you and change how you move around and what you can do. And wait. Actually, that's literally what Mario Odyssey's captures already are though. Yeah, never mind, Mario Galaxy gets no slack cuts. I mean, the goddamn Boo Mushroom is literally just if the Boo was a capturable enemy. To be honest, for as rare as it is in the game, it's probably the best and most unique one the game has to offer, because beyond that, the other power-ups are unfortunately also not exactly that much fun to use. B Mario, the most common upgrade, somehow feels even more stiff and sluggish to move around with than normal Mario, in addition to just taking forever to catch flight. Spring Mario lets you jump high, but also moves around in increments, making it super awkward to move around. And Fire Mario is unusually awkward to angle, in part due to how you come to a complete stop whenever you fire away. That, if anything, especially puts into perspective how inflexible this game is to control. At least the Ice Flower is relatively problem-free, merely letting you run and skate on water, and the Red Star is actually a bit of a hidden gem, allowing you to fly around with no jank and full control of which direction. If only it was also available in more than just one mission in the hub world, maybe it could have even been something that legitimately affected the game positively, instead of just a minor bonus. To be honest, when it all comes down to it, the only part of Galaxy's controls in my opinion that's neither inflexible or sluggish is, ironically enough, the swimming. I know this specifically is a pretty contested topic, but personally, not only do I think that Super Mario Galaxy has the greatest underwater controls out of any Mario game, aside from Odyssey with its cheeps, but they're also actually really good. Unlike most other Mario games, where all you do is tap A to not fall like a rock, Mario Galaxy follows the 64 style of letting you just swim through in any direction you like. However, the kicker is that you can also spam the spin attack and just breeze through the water at a speed even faster than walking on land. And this single-handedly almost completely redeems the underwater gameplay for me. It's not perfect since you don't have full control of your direction, but considering most of the time you're just swimming in a straight line or in a big open area with plenty of space to recalibrate, it ultimately doesn't really matter that much. I wouldn't say I quite prefer swimming to overworld platforming in this game, as swift as it is and as limited as this game's core controls are, since there's always still more to do above water, but the fact that it's close is both commendable and also a little embarrassing. However, in the end, all of this is fairly minor in the grand scheme. For as boring as the core controls of Super Mario Galaxy are, they absolutely don't ruin the game. The game is still perfectly playable since all of the levels are fairly designed with them in mind, and is still largely feel in control of everything, even if it's quite a bit monotone. It's just that they also don't necessarily make the game better either. It's sort of like how I feel about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe compared to other Mario Kart titles, where I ultimately just feel cool, whatever about it. It's one area I think Galaxy 2 definitely at least slightly improved on the whole, as the addition of Yoshi and his own power-ups brought much needed gameplay variety to the mix. And the new power-ups introduced, such as the Rock and Cloud Flower, are generally just more innovative, and are used better throughout that game's levels, even if they also removed the swim twirl span. Just, why did they have to do that? Now swimming is slow once again. However, what does warrant quite strong reactions from me, both positive and negative, would have to be the overarching gameplay structure and the level design. And this might be where I'm gonna lose some more of you guys, however, truth be told, this game is kind of confused on what it wants to be at times. So, when it comes to 3D Mario platformers, you can kind of divide them up into two separate categories. One is the exploration-focused collectathons like 64, Sunshine, Odyssey, and Bowser's Fury, and the other is the more classically linear level-based adventures like 3D Land and World. And while I do personally have a stronger preference for the more open-ended games, since I'm a bit of a travel explorer at heart, both styles can and have been great when they want to be. And then there's Super Mario Galaxy, which finds itself in a weird middle ground between the two, and it kind of works, but also not real at the same time. On one hand, while the levels are largely linear with clearly given goals to follow, They also do still have multiple missions for you to tackle most of the time, and fairly open level design. And, now, on one hand, it's not wrong for a game to be both. On one hand, I can totally understand why Super Mario Galaxy opted for this structure, as it's clearly the simplest way to make an epic space adventure. Like, obviously, you'd want Mario to travel from planet to planet in a game like this, to give you the feel that you're really crossing through space, and if it's linear, that eliminates any potentially frustrating backtracking. However, you also want different planets to stick out, and not just big blobs to get through to the next area. So you still sprinkle in a lot of details, and potentially even branching pathways or off-beaten areas that contain secrets. And it's not impossible to do this. Games like Celeste, for example, do an outstanding job of combining a linear and explorative gameplay structure, where while you have a clearly given path in front of you, you also still gotta look around occasionally and solve a puzzle to get further. Super Mario Galaxy sometimes does this for its stages, but for the most part, it doesn't know what it wants to do, unfortunately, oftentimes resulting in the worst of both worlds. One common occurrence, such as in levels like Good Egg, Gateway, or Gusty Garden Galaxy, is that the level design just ends up consisting of a couple of small planets you can loop over to get through. They usually don't have any interesting elements to them, aside from the fact that they're, well, planets with their own bound gravity. And while yes, gravity shenanigans are kind of the main gimmick of Galaxy, the amount of times the game actually uses it interestingly is relatively sparse. There absolutely are times, such as in Freeze Flame Galaxy where you can alternate between the ceiling and floor, or in Toy Time Galaxy where some platforms have their own gravity field, and to be fair, Space Junk Galaxy is kind of justified in being a whole lot of nothing, since it's supposed to be empty space you venture through. However, in general, gravity feels more like just something incidental to the game, that the developers sprinkle in when they feel like it, and usually just to give the levels a more dramatic feel. Since most of the time when you actually have planet-wide sections, they're usually small and irrelevant without much substance. In general, the best level design from Super Mario Galaxy instead comes from levels and sections that don't really play around with gravity at all, and where it can actually fall off normally. And at that point, it feels like it could have been any other 3D Mario platformer, except with worse controls. It just also happens to take place in space, and you also use launch stars instead of warp boxes to get to new areas. It's certainly still fun, but yeah, beyond the more grandiose vibes, it's not that special. Another example of poorly implemented level design, at least to me, can be found in the likes of Honey Hive, Beach Bowl, or Gold Leaf Galaxy. In these galaxies, you instead have these giant open areas to roam around, however exploring them is almost meaningless, because not only are they not part of the path forward, but even if you go out of your way to look for off-beaten paths, the reward doesn't matter anyways. It's usually just coins, 1-ups, some random bonus room, you know, just a bunch of useless stuff that doesn't matter. And it's really puzzling that they didn't do more to make exploring matter. Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Super Mario 3D World, despite being way more linear than this game, actually did incentivize you to go out of your way and look for secrets, by rewarding you with smaller collectibles that went to unlocking more levels. And while you may say that's an unfair comparison since those games obviously came later, New Super Mario Bros. On the DS did this exact thing too, with its star coins hidden throughout its levels, and I was in 2D. I still appreciate these types of planets a bit, since they contribute to the world feeling bigger and more lived in, but from a gameplay standpoint, they definitely feel like wasted potential that would have worked better in any actual collectathon, where you not only had something worthwhile in every nook and cranny, but also had actual versatile controls to have more ways to reach those. In general, there's not one type of level in Super Mario Galaxy, and while that may be countered by that it adds variety, to me when the variety is usually just the worst executed ideas of what it could be, it comes across more like as if Nintendo was torn between multiple ideas. And it's yet another area where I feel that Galaxy 2 just far outshines the first game. Instead of tackling a dozen different level structures all at once, that game stuck almost exclusively to linear styled journeys for its galaxies, and thanks to this, they were able to focus much more on creating interesting levels in this style, with almost every galaxy featuring a unique gimmick of sorts. And I'd argue that's the most important thing of all, because as much as I'm biased for big and explorative stages, I'd any day of the week take a more well-designed linear stage, over a poorly done open-ended one. However, while this inconsistency is certainly a bit of an issue, it's not the end of the world. Plenty of galaxies are still more than good, even great experiences to go through, despite sometimes having these problems. What is a pretty massive problem though is the inconsistency in quality, ranging not just between the galaxies of the game, but arguably even between stars within individual galaxies. So here's the thing, just like how 3D Mario games can be divided up into two categories, the galaxies of Super Mario Galaxy can also typically be divided into two pretty clear groups. There are the robust galaxies, and then there are the mystery galaxies. The robust galaxies, which there are 15 of, are the big hitters where most of the effort went into. Whenever people talk about which levels they like from this game, these are understandably the only ones that usually get to call the shots, and why wouldn't they? They're the ones that typically feel like actual levels, since they have clearly defined themes, and with the exception of Dusty Dune and Battle Rock Galaxy, which have an additional hidden star, all of them have a total of 6 missions. 3 of them are normal stars, 1's a secret star, and then 2 are prankster comets, which are like harder takes on stuff you've experienced previously in the level. And on the one hand, this specific consistency has its upsides. It gives the levels more staying power when there's more things to come back to, and generally makes them pop out more. The problem though is that a lot of these levels, I'm pretty sure aren't made in mind to have this many stars. So a lot of the time, most galaxies end up having maybe 1 or 2 really good stars, and then a third one that's just lazy, or random, or completely different in tone from everything else. Take Beach Ball Galaxy for example. Its first and secret stars are both solid attempts at taking advantage of the beach theme, whether you're looking for the ocean bed for star chips or climbing up waterfalls. But then the second star only has you stealing a golden shell from a penguin underwater and showing it to a teacher to win, which is not only shamefully easy and short, but it's also not even that much different from what you were doing in the first star. And the third star starts off reasonable by having you explore a mysterious cavern under the seafloor, but then you're immediately sent to this stone cyclone fortress thingy, which doesn't really have anything to do with the beach theme in the slightest. Another weird example of this weird overbloatation would be Gusty Garden Galaxy, where the first 2 stars follow a pretty trite formula of venturing through heavily vegetated environments, and then the third star ditches all of that for random gravity blocks in the sky, which by all means could have been anywhere else, like, I don't know, Space Junk Galaxy? Like, would this not have been a better mission for that level than say that random airship siege? Not all of these filler missions are necessarily unfun, or well, some of them definitely are, but they absolutely feel tacked on for no reason other than to give the levels more stars. And it's especially a problem because these 3 main missions have to be done in order, no ifs or buts. And on one hand, I understand why all of the missions are separated. They all take you to completely different places most of the time, and a few times they don't, they still make changes made to their starting planets to lead you to a different path. But just because I understand it, it doesn't make the problem go away. In a more open-ended collectathon, it doesn't matter as much if 1 or 2 stars are underwhelming, because you can always just tackle something else instead. But because galaxy stars are their own linear adventure, where they want you to earn the next stars, the sloppier parts just stick out way more. Especially when you have to get through them to unlock a star that's actually fun and natural. And I don't mind having to earn stars per se, as long as the preceding missions build up to them organically like they do in Sunshine. As a kid, I would usually do 1 or 2 stars of a galaxy, proceed to another one, and then maybe a few weeks later, return to realize I still had more missions left. Which always felt super cool because I thought I already knew everything about them. And from that lens, even some of the more random stars had their charm. It kind of gave the same feel as discovering an area in a collectathon level you never found until now. Which on one hand, it does ever so slightly make up for exploration otherwise being pointless in this game. If only there also wasn't so much slop floating out these levels, it would be even better.
Wait, so you're saying exploring these galaxies is meaningless, yes? But you also said they have secret stars just a few minutes ago. Doesn't that make you completely wrong?
I wish it did. Yes, as I also just mentioned, each robust galaxy does also have a 4th secret star, which is usually located a bit off the beaten path. However, remember what I said about these galaxies not only being linear, but each star taking you on an entirely different road? This isn't like, say, checking behind a specific building in Mario Odyssey's Metro Kingdom or Mario 64's Wet Dry World, where you can always access there at any time. No, these secret stars can be located anywhere from the start of the first star to halfway through the second mission, and you only get to know which mission you access the secret star from after you beat them all. So not only is there no point in going out of your way to look for them right away, but on the second time around, when you're actually looking for them, if you miss the gate to the star at any point, you might as well just start over because there's no way to backtrack in these levels. And that can range anywhere from a trivial annoyance if it was just at the start, to just horrible if it was anywhere else. Because the pacing and movement, as said earlier, isn't exactly made for you to breeze through these levels, unlike in a game like 3D World. However, enough about that. Do these secret stars incentivize you to explore the level instead of the mission you can access them from though? Well, unfortunately not much still. Gusty Garden has probably one of the cooler secret stars, where you need to grab an invincibility star and ram into a golden chomp. That's a pretty nifty and satisfying puzzle to solve, and Golden Leaf Galaxy actually takes a decent advantage to its open-ended design, since you actually get to explore the entirety of the main island looking for an odd corner. However, most of the time, you actually don't have to explore at all, paradoxically enough. Because most of these secret stars you reach by just finding a hungry Luma along the way and feeding it a certain amount of star bits. Notice how I say on the way, because they are always visible in plain sight, and the challenge is usually just if you were patient enough to collect as many star bits as possible up until that point. If you didn't, f*** you. I always snap every star bit I see out of instinct, but imagine if you're one short. This isn't a secret star, it's just a cheap paywall, and I don't feel rewarded at all for discovering them. You know, the best secret stars in the game are probably the ones found in Deep Dark and Beach Ball Galaxy. And do you want to know why? They're not only open-ended levels made to be explored, but their secret stars can also be found on any of their free missions. Or well, technically Beach Ball doesn't let you access it on Star 1, but it's still more than every other galaxy. Not even Gold Leaf Galaxy thought of this. These two are the only ones that don't feel completely wasted in this regard. You could technically extend this praise to Honey Hives and Goody Galaxy's Luigi Stars as well, but at the same time, for those two, you're given a clear picture of exactly where they are before starting those missions, so yeah, never mind. Honestly, even the Prankster Stars are kind of annoyingly handled in this game. Not because they're ungruelingly hard, outside of a couple of purple coin stars and a Melty Molten Daredevil run, they're usually fairly generous in their difficulty, but rather because of how the game puts unnecessary restrictions on when you can do them. It's one thing that you only unlock them after doing the host star they're based on, that's fine. But instead of all Prankster comets being indefinitely unlocked after that, they sort of turn on and off every once in a while. Normally after beating any other random mission. And then whenever you can have a go at them, you're restricted from doing any other star inside the galaxy at the moment. Which I'm just like, why? I guess the idea is that they're kind of supposed to be like a real comet that passes by every once in a while, and whenever they appear, the whole galaxy changes for the more chaotic. So while I suppose they add a semblance of a dangerous atmosphere, and you're gonna be incentivized to knock them out right away, the fact that you can just do any other galaxy in the meantime anyways to wait out the comet kinda makes that irrelevant anyways. So in the end, the fact that they're not always available right away ends up just being an inconvenience gameplay-wise. And most of the comets are also not really that good either, particularly the speedy comets. They give you so much time to knock out the star that in the end the experience hardly feels any different from the host star, therefore adding even more to the feeling of sloppy overbloatation. But anyways, that's just the robust galaxies though. For as many smaller issues that collectively plague them, on the whole, they're all still generally fun levels to journey across. And while they're unbalanced as far as quality and level design and philosophy go, I more than enjoy my time with them. What I don't like at all though is the other half of the game. I'm talking about the mystery galaxies. These levels, more than anything, are what primarily sink a lot of the immersion and quality consistency of the game. So, remember Super Mario 64 and Sunshine and how they had these smaller one-star areas you could find by exploring their main hubs? Well, they were nice enough smaller surprises to break up the pace from the big levels. Whether some of them were good or not is another question, but in theory, they were a worthy addition, and gave the game more variety. And well, that's basically what the mystery galaxies of this game are, except 10 times worse and more pathetic. Because these are not treated as smaller bonuses for you to find by exploring the observatory. Heck, the observatory doesn't really have anything of value. It's just a barren hub for you to walk across to get to different worlds. Instead, they're treated as their own separate levels within the individual dome worlds. I'm sorry, what the f***? You mean to tell me they're actually equal to the robust galaxies? Not only does this set false expectations for them, and not only is the consistency of the worlds a roller coaster, especially when there's only 2 to 3 big galaxies, and sometimes 4 of these, but they even make up the majority of levels in general of Super Mario Galaxy. The robust galaxies max out at 15, which is a pretty normal amount. The mystery galaxies though, there are 27 of them, almost twice as many. And sure, it may not technically say that much, when they only have a 1-star instead of 6, but when their galaxies given as much spotlight as the main ones, it makes the whole game wholly inconsistent and come across as lazy and unfinished. With the exception of Bowie Base, all of these mystery levels only have a 1-star, thereby giving you no reason to go back to them after beating them, not even a Prankster Comet, and if they don't tackle a unique gimmick you wish could have been expanded on for another star, then they're just basic. Many of the early game mystery galaxies have themes that often feel bland and fake, like why is there just a random planet of flip switches, or a bunch of washed out sweets and bakery products forming a road to a star in the middle of nowhere. And lengthwise, they're often tiny and don't take much more than a minute to complete. If I didn't know any better, I'd assume they were meant to be extensions of pre-existing robust galaxies, because they're so small and underwhelming that they don't even feel like actual full platforming levels like you'd see in Super Mario 3D World. Like, is there any reason for Honeyclimb Galaxy to be its own separate thing, rather than a secret area of Honey Hive? Or why Flip Switch Galaxy isn't the last area of a Good Galaxy secret star, like maybe at the end of that branching path on the way to Dino Piranha? As it is, that split path is pointless. I genuinely don't understand why the developers didn't just incorporate these small levels into the big ones. Like heck, Hurry Scurry Galaxy even already is the secret star of Sea Slide Galaxy as well. So like, why did it also need to exist separately? It just makes the whole game look and feel poorly planned when there's such a massive dip in quality between everything. And heck, if some of these mystery galaxies were stars in big galaxies, that would even fix the overbloatation issue of them filling out the star counter with useless junk. Like, are you seriously telling me a hunt for a golden shell was a higher priority for Beach Bowl Galaxy than, say, having Drip Drop Galaxy there for a hidden star? Or to have Guppy again at the bottom of the Deep Dark Galaxy Underground Lake instead of Kingfin? Oh yeah, and that's another thing, Kingfin. Probably one of the coolest and most climactic boss fights in the entire game. Do you fight him at the end of a spooky galaxy, or maybe at the end of a world? Nah, he's just tucked away in a random 1-star level because they seriously had no better idea somehow. It just boggles my mind how such gifted game developers with such amazing and creative ideas, even if they're not perfect, did not see any better ways to implement these mystery galaxies. These levels as they are now, rather than feeling like quick gimmick bonuses to break up the pace, feel like complete wasted potential, either because they could have been bigger or part of something to make other levels bigger. And in the end, they just feel like filler tech demos that bloat out the game even further. Say what you want about some of Mario Odyssey's kingdoms, while it did have some like the Cloud and Ruined Kingdom that felt like they could have been much bigger, those were also just meant to be boss arenas, rather than fully explorable kingdoms, and from that lens, they did more than necessary by still including a few other moons. At the very least, they learned their lesson for Galaxy 2, where they not only gave each mystery galaxy 2 stars instead of 1, but also just gave them way more unique themes and gameplay mechanics on average, both factors of which did a tremendous job at making them stick out more. And I suppose that's the best takeaway I can get after this disaster. Anyways, enough about this. So, after all of these issues with the game's level design, what is something that Super Mario Galaxy does genuinely nail that I don't disagree on with most people? Well, there might be one. It's absolutely the atmosphere and world building. However, notice how I did not say story though. That part is greatly overstated, I feel, by many. Like, oh wow, Bowser is being his usual megalomaniac self as always. Except this time, instead of just taking over the world, oh my god, this time he even wants to take over the whole universe! Isn't that so much more epic and cool? Okay, but seriously, I just don't think it's anything that mind-blowing. No offense, it's just the same he always does, but on a bigger scale. And that's fine, because in Mario games, it matters much more how the gameplay is. However, the presentation of Super Mario Galaxy is definitely one of a kind, and one of the main things I see people understandably bring up whenever they praise the game. Because unlike frankly every other mainline Mario platformer, which typically has a bright and cheerful tone, Mario Galaxy, particularly this first entry, is usually a lot more sad and melancholy. And this unique twist honestly even diminishes some of the pre-existing legitimate problems of the game. Even as someone who doesn't mind the typical tone of Mario games, I also can't ever say it doesn't get at least a little bit tiring and repetitive when the atmosphere of every game is just happy-go-lucky, since at some point it does also come across as shallow when there's no reason to take anything seriously. I mean geez, Kirby, a series for an even younger audience, gets to have insane lore and drama, why can't Mario have it too? Oh yeah, that's right, somebody thinks it's overrated. But that's also why Mario Galaxy stands out so much in this regard. The developers figured that, hey, space is dark and lonely, so why not reflect that more accurately with this game? There certainly are bright levels, but in general, most of the galaxies and even the hub world not only has a much darker color scheme to reflect this game's extraterrestrial setting, but even the music feels so much deeper as well, thanks to not only the grandiose and dramatic melodies, but also the fact that it's all orchestrated, making it feel even more real. A lot of the music is also more slow-paced than normally, allowing you to take in the setting in a different way, and even many of the levels that do have bright color schemes and skyboxes still make it clear that you're in space, whether by filling the sky with stars everywhere or at the very least just not having any clouds. And all of this adds a much more intense sense of immersion that oftentimes is not seen in the Mario franchise. And as a result, even though a large plentiful of levels are a little uninterestingly designed, they're still a blast to venture through just because of how grand they can feel. It doesn't absolve them of their issues, but it makes the game tremendously fun still in spite of them. Even if by all means, I prefer levels that nail both atmosphere and the layout, like in Sunshine and Odyssey. And all of this is not even to mention the fact that this is the only mainline Mario game to have a deep and developed backstory for one of its main characters, Rosalina. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest here, I never really paid much attention to the storybook as a kid. I knew that it existed, I just didn't really care about it. And to an extent, I still think it's a bit of an overhyped aspect of the game, since it's just an optional thing that doesn't affect playing through the game or its story. But even so, I can't appreciate enough the fact that they not only gave us a way to read up on her backstory and what events led her to where she is now, but also actually made it pretty deep and emotional, tackling subjects such as loss and loneliness. It's probably the one area I can confidently say that Galaxy 2 doesn't triumph over the first game. Because even if 2's brighter atmosphere certainly has its charm too, and makes that game feel more welcoming, Galaxy 1's vibes are just on another level. Even if I also thought the universe going down was a little overkill for an ending. Like, seriously? At that point it got kind of hard to take it seriously. But yeah, that said, as much as the presentation kicks ass, I still don't think it's close enough to making this game better than either Galaxy 2 or most other 3D Marios. For as much as the atmosphere does stonks to make the game feel more profound, and for as much as it heightens the quality of the galaxies, at the end of the day, as I implied earlier, the gameplay is always going to be more important by a landslide. A good story and lore drops can certainly enhance an already great game, which is certainly true here, but if the game is You can make the greatest plot ever and I could not care less. If I want to take part of a good story and character interactions, I'd watch a movie or a TV show. For games, meanwhile, the most important thing is keeping me interactively engaged in what I'm doing. And as long as the atmosphere isn't completely dull and soulless, believe me, a good presentation is still important for keeping me engaged, it's not the deciding factor. And for as amazing as Galaxy 1's coat of paint is, it still doesn't quite take away from how unfocused this game's level philosophy is. And it's also part of why I don't really care about the Comet Observatory that much as a hub world. Like, sure, it's relaxing and all, but again, there's nothing to do. It's just an empty husky traverse to get to the different domes. One or two one-ups located in random spots is not enough to make exploring it worthwhile. At least Starship Mario in Galaxy 2 has a bunch of NPCs to talk to, and a cloud flower you can destroy gravity with. And all of this is not even to mention the single worst thing about this game. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present the absolute worst excuse of a post-game that this game has to offer. Now, admittedly, the post-game 100% completion has never exactly been the strong suit of most 3D Mario games, with the exception of Odyssey, and that was just because it was more of what the base game already offered. However, with most of the other games, it's still usually harmless, and even the worst seeming post-games had ways to make them less egregious. Of course, Super Mario Sunshine had the blue coins which were impossible to find, but at least you could always look up a guide. 3D World forcing you to play every level with every character was pointless padding, but at least you could also do that through multiplayer, and it didn't lock the final level behind it at least. And even Galaxy 2's green stars, for as long as they took to gather, did make your approach to the levels a little differently at least. Then we get to Super Mario Galaxy though, and at first, it doesn't seem too bad. Right after beating the final Bowser for the first time, you gain access to these new purple comets, which are basically 100 coin challenges scattered throughout the main robust galaxies. They're fine, some of them are timer-based challenges, and others make you go out and explore, and they're a nice little bonus reminiscent of Mario 64's 100 coin stars, especially since they also add a bit more value to the open-ended galaxies. However, surely this is it, this is all you need to get 100% completion, right? No, you must die! Instead, after getting all of the purple coin stars, you have to play the entirety of Bowser's Galaxy Reactor again. And suddenly, you now have the power to travel to another world. What's different about this world, you might ask? You get to play the entire game all over again, except with Luigi.
Super Luigi Galaxy!
Could you get any less innovative? I don't care if Luigi is more fun to control than Mario because of his higher jump. I don't care that some of the Cosmic Race comments are made a bit harder, and I don't care that Super Mario Galaxy is at least a functionally fun game to play through. But forcing me to repeat the whole game again to finish it in its entirety and unlock the last level is never gonna be acceptable. I could play the greatest game of all time and have as much fun with it as I could possibly have, but if I had to do the exact same thing again for 10 more hours, I will always get bored. Unless I take a long ass break before replaying it again. Especially because this is not a fast paced game I can breeze through. Not only is this underwhelming, especially after building this new world up so dramatically, but it's also just completely lazy, and I fail to see how the developers thought this would be in any way acceptable. I guess their thought process was that you were meant to drop the game after getting all 100 stars, and only come back to the game later in a few months if you wanted to replay. But like, if I ever wanted to replay the game, I could just start up a new save file instead. You shouldn't lock 100% completion behind the replay. That's completely idiotic. They should have just made the Luigi permanently unlockable on any save file if you beat the game. What even is this pointless restriction? As it is, it's not a reward, it's just padding. And it's even worse because the final level you do unlock after slogging through all of this is the most boring shit imaginable. You just do the prologue from the beginning again, except this time Bowser doesn't attack and you collect purple coins in a straight line. I don't even think on paper it's a bad ending to the game. I guess it's kind of meant to be a relaxing reward, since now the Star Festival can truly begin and you can talk to all of the NPCs from your journey. But why did I have to play through the whole game again just for this? It would have worked perfectly fine as a final unlockable after getting all of the purple coin stars. Especially because this is also a purple coin level. Just, there's poorly executed ideas, and then there's genuinely stupid ideas that shouldn't even have been on the table. I mean, at the very least, this is all optional garbage, and you don't have to waste through this ordeal to enjoy Super Mario Galaxy. So as unfun as this is, it's probably a smaller problem on the whole for the game than all of the other issues I brought up. However, it's still absolutely something that needs to be brought up, since it puts such an unnecessary restriction on experiencing the true ending of this game. Where the inconsistent level design and limited controls are more disappointing than anything, this is actually horrible. You, Super Luigi Galaxy, for dragging down this game so much. Wow, maybe I got a little too aggressive on this game. But yeah, I think I've rambled on quite enough about all of my thoughts on the game and why I don't think it's as great as it's hyped up to be. Do I dislike Super Mario Galaxy? Absolutely not. For as critical as I am about this game's shortcomings, it's less because they make a bad game and more so because they make a less than stellar 3D Mario game. And because the Super Mario franchise is not only one of my all-time favorites ever in gaming, but the 3D platform entries especially are as impeccable as they are at what they do, it just sticks out much more when a 3D Mario game has enough flaws that I need more than one hand to count them. That's not to say every other 3D Mario is flawless. I certainly prefer this game to the bland mediocrity that is 3D Land and the open world blueprint that's Bowser's Fury, and yeah, those are probably the only ones I wouldn't play over this. Everything else just feels more developed and well thought out of. Yes, I'm one of those psychopaths that actually like 64DS. I mean, I don't know, besides the poor controls, it's just more Super Mario 64, and that's good! But yeah, in conclusion, Super Mario Galaxy is a game that's both ahead of its time, but also behind at the same time. Its grand and sentimental atmosphere do a great job at breathing a life into Mario's largest adventure ever in scope, and invoking some rare much needed emotion in a series not known for it. However, below that cloud of beautiful serenity also lies a confused gameplay structure. It tries to add gravity at times, but doesn't make much interesting level design use of it. It tries to have open-ended levels, despite the structure being almost entirely linear, and it also switches completely on a whim between developed 6-star galaxies and barely surface-scratching 1-star stages. And while the core Mario platforming gameplay is always going to be fun, even that isn't as versatile as the best of Nintendo's works, so when all is considered, I think it deserves to only get an 8 out of 10. It's still great in the end, and it's also just a little monotone, and inconsistent enough to not be a masterpiece. Galaxy 2 is better, it has always been better, and it will continue to be better for many years to come in my opinion. Nah, I'm just kidding, this game is obviously a 10 out of 10. Please don't kill me, guys.
Dude, all these issues, and yet you didn't bring up the single most game-breaking one. The fact Mario can breathe in space!
Okay, to be fair, I did actually consider maybe bringing that up as well, since as a kid, this specific detail did admittedly perplex me quite a bit. But you know what, at the end of the day, I'm just gonna roll with the assumption that the space in the Marioverse is breathable. And that's that, because it's not something that really affects the game anyways. But yeah, those are just my full thoughts on the first Super Mario Galaxy. I imagine it's probably a bit of a controversial topic, and some people are probably gonna be upset with this review, but you know what, I could not care less. I love Mario with all of my heart, and I also still love the Super Mario Galaxies for what they set out to do, and the memories they gave me. But that's also exactly why I wish it could have been even better, so my experiences could have been even greater. And I'm not gonna stray away from expressing why and how. My opinions are not gonna evict somebody's family from their home, nor is it like Nintendo knows who I am anyways. So it's not like this is gonna have an effect on their future game design. However, enough about that. What is your opinion on Super Mario Galaxy? Do you absolutely love the game, or has it fallen off for you as well over time? Let me know all of this in the comment section down below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and want to see me ramble on about even more Mario things. With all of that being said, I'm signing off now. Until next time.